Welcome to today's training session on the data collection tool. This session is part of our employer education program, which is a key component to managing risk of the plan and is tied to the Employer Attestation of Compliance initiative. We will be providing an overview of the DCT tool and the steps you will take to navigate, extract, import, validate, and correct errors. We'll also provide some examples of how you can load and validate your data prior to submitting. We'll be covering a lot of information today. The presentation will be recorded and made available on our CAT website. Presenting today are Trina Willard and Deepak Patel, pension analysts from our employer services team, and Sean McFarland, a finance administrator with our finance team. Trina and Deepak will walk us through the DCT process, and Sean will be reviewing the contribution reconciliation process. I will now pass the presentation over to Trina.
Thank you, Sandy. What is DCT? DCT stands for Data Collection Tool. As the name suggests, the Data Collection Tool is a data collection site used to collect member data from our employers. The data collection year is from January 1st to December 31st. Here's the timeline for the DCT. The DCT tool will be available on Friday, January 21st. The submission of the DCT data is due to CAT by March 7th, 2022. Meeting this deadline is important as it impacts the annual statement delivery, especially for members with multiple employer participation. This slide provides a brief outline of the DCT process. Step 1. Employers receive the DCT data from CAT. Any data you previously submitted to CAT by the December 3rd deadline has been loaded into the DCT. It includes the demographic information and any in-year data that was reported to CAT during the plan year. Step 2. When you receive the data, it should be exported, reviewed, and reconciled against your data. This will help to identify any missing enrollments, status changes, and discrepancies in reported earnings and contributions. However, if you only have a few members, you can review these members individually on the site rather than exporting the data from the DCT. Step 3. After the data has been reconciled, you must upload the following files as applicable in the order they appear: status update file, earnings and contributions file, member information and year-end updates file, prior year retroactive payments file, and last day worked file. Step 4, after loading the files, you'll review and correct any errors that appear after running your data validations. Step 5, once your data has been cleaned up, run validations, and if no errors, you can then proceed with step 6 and submit your data to CAT. The DCT guide is a great resource to help you through the process. The DCT guide will be available on January 21st under the Help drop-down in the DCT. The guide provides a detailed process overview, instructions on how to navigate the DCT, explanations of the warnings and errors, as well as the corrective actions required, and examples of common scenarios. There's also a DCT submission checklist to assist you with submitting the DCT. As always, you can contact your employer pension analyst with any questions. Here's the link to access the DCT site. On the login page, enter your email address in the email field and your SDoc password in the password field. New users will receive an email with their login credentials. If you have problems logging in, please contact your employer pension analyst. Once logged in, the site will default to the home screen. This is where CAT will communicate any upcoming deadlines and DCT news. The DCT is due March 7th, 2022. However, if you finish early, submit as soon as you're finished. Let's do a quick walkthrough of the various DCT features. At the top of the home screen is the navigation ribbon. You will use the drop-down options under Member Data, Reports, Utilities, and Help to perform various tasks in the DCT. Below that is the quick search for member lookup. Right below the quick search is the member data summary. Below the member data summary are the data problems. This slide provides a drop-down menu selection for your reference. Please feel free to print this slide and use it when working on the DCT. Now I will pass it to Deepak to go over a live demonstration.
Thanks, Trina. We will now do a demonstration of the DCT and show how each of these features are used. In the navigation ribbon, the member data dropdown can be used to view and edit data, run validations, add new members, and submit data to CAT. Reports will help you through the DCT process when it comes to identifying data problems, reconciling data discrepancies, and so forth. The Utilities button is used to import, export, or reset the data. You will find the DCT guide and information about DCT under the Help function. To the far right of your screen, you will see your employer name. If you administer more than one, there will be a drop-down for you to select the employer you are working on. The quick search function allows you to search for a member by last name or first name, SIN, or employee number. The member data summary gives a snapshot of the total number of members that are currently in the DCT, the total number of new members, and any status changes. The data problems gives a snapshot of all the errors and warnings that have been found after running the data validation. It will show the count for the total number of errors and warnings based on the data category. These errors and warnings will need to be corrected prior to the data being submitted to CAT.
When you select a member, the member details will populate, including a gray bar that will provide general information about the member, their employee number, name, and date of birth. It will default to the Personal tab. Each tab displays an upper and a lower section. The upper section will display different information depending on which tab has been selected. The lower section always shows the member's payroll data. Changes to the member's status or payroll data can be changed in the lower section of any tab. Under Plan Design, you can select DB Prime or DB Plus. If the member is full-time, then the applicable plan design will be DB Prime. If the member is other than regular full-time or contract, the plan design will be DB Plus. In addition, I would like to point out the two possible active statuses under employment status. There is an ACT active, which is used when a member either joins the plan or returns to active status from a leave. The other status is IDT active. This is an active status used when members transfer between plan designs. This status should be used for members who are transferring from full-time status to OTRFT status or vice versa. Please use IDT active status when the member changes plan designs. The Personal tab displays the member's demographic information. This data is frozen, cannot be changed manually or with a data load. This is to ensure that the demographic information in the DCT is not accidentally overridden. If any changes are needed, please submit a change of information form to CAT. This is an example of a DB Plus member record. As this member is OTRFT, the plan design is DB Plus. You will see that the lower section has different headers, earnings, contributions, and employer contributions. Once we import the earnings and contributions file or the year-to-date file, this data will be imported to the appropriate fields. The Summary tab displays the following. The Reported Data column reflects data that's been reported in year and/or imported by you. The Calculated Data column is the amount calculated by the DCT based on built-in specifications. It will use the payroll data and reported status change to calculate the expected value. The Difference column shows any differences between the reported data and the calculated data. If there are any manual changes made, clicking the Recalculate button will update these numbers. Note, in the upper section, you can only change the pension adjustment amounts if needed. There's a comment section you can use to enter any comments that may be helpful for validations. The Retroactive Pays tab displays the allocation of any retroactive earnings made in the reporting year. The retroactive earnings record will be created when the prior year retroactive payment data file is uploaded. This tab is only applicable for DB Prime members, as any retroactive amounts paid to a DB Plus member should be included as part of their current year eligible earnings under regular earnings and reported in the year the payment was made. If a member under the DB Prime plan design has taken any partial day leaves during the year, it can be reported on the Partial Day Leaves tab. This does not apply to DB Plus members. This is a manual process as we do not have a load file for these scenarios. As the partial leaves are entered, the expected service will be recalculated. To add a partial day leave, click the plus button to add a new row. Then, select the date the member was on leave and enter the service associated with that leave. For any partial days entered, the service showing in the status and payroll data section will need to be adjusted. You can enter as many partial day leaves as are applicable. The Validation Result tab displays all the warnings and errors associated with the member. The first column is the override. If the member data is correct and an error is still appearing, you can contact your employer pension analyst to override the flag. When the flag has been overridden, a check mark will appear and the row will be highlighted in green. This step should be done at the very end after your final validations have been run. Afterwards, your data can be submitted. Otherwise, if you run validations again, the checked flag will be removed. The field column shows what the warning or error relates to. An example of this is if the contributions are outside of tolerance. The reported value shows the data that was reported in the DCT. The expected value is what has been calculated by the DCT. The next column, error description, gives an idea for what must be corrected. The last column, severity, shows the type of validation, if it is a warning or an error. If you've reviewed the warning and confirmed the data, you can submit the DCT with warnings. However, errors must be fixed or overridden before the DCT data can be submitted. The Timeline tab is a visual of member status changes that have occurred throughout the plan year, January 1 to December 31. The NC Status tab will apply to our college sector employers only. If a DB Plus member was non-contributing for the full plan year, then a last day worked is needed. The date must be prior to January 1st of the DCT year. Now I will pass it to Deepak to go over a live demonstration.
Thanks, Trina. Let's do a live demonstration of the member details screen in DCT. During the demonstration, we will cover 3 examples of the member details page. One for a member who has no in-year data, then a member who has in-year data and on leave, and lastly, a member who changed from a full-time to OTRFT status. In-year data is data that you have reported to the plan throughout the year. We will open DCT and do a quick search for member Mark Profile 3. The member details screen can be viewed either before or after the import files have been loaded. When pulling up a member record, the member details screen will default to the Personal Data tab. The upper section will display the member's demographic information, which will include their surname, first name, gender, marital status, language preference, date of birth, hire date, and enrollment date. The lower section will display their status and payroll data. All members will have at least one record representing their status at the start of the plan year, January 1st. Or if they enrolled later in the year, the effective date will be their plan enrollment date. If a member had multiple events during the year, more records will appear. The record will include the effective date of their status, annual salary rate, plan design, employment status, employee type, employee group, and related earnings, contributions, and service, if applicable, for that status period. Please note the annual salary rate is only required for members on LTD or WSIB. The status and payroll data section will always appear at the bottom of the member details screen, no matter what tab you are on. As previously mentioned, there are 2 possible active statuses on the DCT. There is an ACT active, which is used when a member either joins the plan or returns to active status from a leave. The other active status is IDT active. This is an active status when members transfer between plan designs as a result of a full-time to part-time status change or vice versa. Please use the IDT active status when the member is changing plan designs. The Summary tab will display the reported contributions, pension adjustments, and service amounts. if applicable. The calculated section will show what DCT has calculated as the expected values based on information provided. Any differences will be displayed under difference. If there are any corrections made to a member's record, you can click Recalculate, and the values in the table will update. If there are any retroactive earnings reported for DB Prime members, it will appear under the Retroactive Pays tab and display the year and amount of earnings reported for that period. On the Partial Day Leaves tab, manually enter partial day leaves for DB Prime members only. The Validation Results tab will summarize all the errors and warnings triggered for this member. Errors and warnings could be the result of demographic or status and payroll data discrepancies. Please note, when you first log on to the DCT, there will be no errors or warnings as the validations have not yet been run, as you can see here. After the validations have been run and any errors or warnings have been fixed on a member's record, you can click Run Validation within the member's record to update the errors and warnings. This will run the validation for this member only. The requirement is to have no errors. All warnings must be reviewed on a member's record. The Timeline tab provides a chronological sequence of the member's various status changes during the plan year. The NC Status tab allows you to enter a last date worked for a member who did not contribute in the current plan year. These members will have an NC other than full-time not contributing status. In our first example, we'll look at a member, a DB Prime DB Plus member who has no in-year data. So for this scenario, we'll use a DB Prime member, Jessica Record 1. In the quick search field, we will type in her last name, Record 1, and press enter. The member details page will open and default to the Personal tab. As this member has no in-year data, DCT will only have their demographic data and the last status we had on file as of the prior year end. Or as previously mentioned, the effective date of their plan enrollment, if they enrolled in the plan later in the year. If there is no in-year data showing in the member's record, the cause may be due to 1. No in-year data was reported to CAT. 2. The member did not have a status change during the year. For example, someone who was active for the full year and had no breaks in service. Or 3, CAT was not able to load this information into DCT. Our second example is a member who has in-year data and on leave. We will now review the record for a member with in-year data. So going back to the home screen, we will do a quick search for Amy Profile 2. In the lower section, under status and payroll data, we can see that this member has had multiple in-year transactions throughout the year. The first record is the in-year data that was reported to CAT. It shows the earnings, contributions, and service from the start of the year, or the date the member enrolled in the plan, up to the day before the start of the leave. The next record reflects the effective date of her unpaid leave status, and the following is her return to work status. In this final example, we're going to show a member who has changed from a full-time to OTRFT status. We're going to search for Bruce Record 3. At the start of the year, this member was active as a full-time member under DB Prime. Effective March 16, 2021, he became part-time, so he is now a member under the DB Plus plan design. If the status change was reported to CAT in year, the DCT data would show all the details under the first record, their earnings, contributions, and so forth. A second row would also be displayed to show the effective date of their new IDT active status.
All right, we'll now move on to exporting DCT data. You can export the DCT data and compare it to your active payroll records. The export files can be used for member reconciliations to determine if all in-year data was provided to CAT and to determine what files need to be imported as a result. There are 8 files available for export. Member Demographic Information file. This file contains all the members in the plan as of December 31st, 2021, and can be used to help determine if any members are missing from CAT records. For example, new plan enrollments not previously reported to CAT. Member Status Updates file. This file contains the in-year data reported to CAT throughout the year. For instance, leave notifications, terminations, retirements, and deaths. Member Earnings, Contributions, and Service file. For any status updates reported in the year, this file contains their earnings, contributions, and service as of the effective status date. The exports for member prior year retroactive payments, member partial day leave, and members with NC statuses and a last day worked will only have data after the data records have been manually updated by you. CAT does not collect this type of member data during the year, so it will not be reflected in the DCT until you enter it. Member data, expected amounts, and difference. This file contains all the members in the DCT and shows any differences between contribution amounts reported and expected, differences between pension adjustments reported and expected, and differences between pensionable service reported and expected. This will assist employers with reconciling their year-end information for each member. All member data. This reporting tool will provide you with a user-friendly Excel file of the data reported in the DCT. These data files can be exported at any point during the data sharing process, either before and or after your data has been imported.
Export files allow you to extract the data in the DCT so you can compare the CAT information to your records for payroll and member statuses. We strongly suggest you review these files and use them as a starting point to update your information with CAT. As Trina mentioned, you can export 8 data files from the DCT. Let us run through a simple example of checking the membership on the DCT and comparing it to your records. The various export files can be found under the Utilities tab. Select the drop-down and then Export Data. Here are the 8 data files. For this example, we will be selecting the member demographic information. Once selected, we will click Download. In the pop-up window, you'll be given the option to open the file, to view, or save it to your directory. Let's open the file. Suppose a few members joined the pension plan this year, but you were unsure if all their enrollment forms were sent to CAT. To help you identify any missing enrollments, let's compare the member demographic export with our sample employer payroll file. This member demographic information file will show you all the members for ABC employer by SIN, including their name, date of birth, date of hire, and so on. When you extract, the output is in an Excel format. We will bring up both files side by side and compare. Immediately, I noticed that my membership count is off because my payroll file has 15 members, but the CAT file only has 14. Since my population is small, and in the interest of time, we have already sorted the CAT file by surname to visually compare the two files to find the missing member. By doing this, I can see that John Sample 3, which we have already highlighted in yellow, is the member missing from the DCT. If you see that members are missing in the DCT, your responsibility is to immediately enroll the member into the CAT pension plan by enrolling them via the employer portal. In the meantime, you can continue with the DCT by adding John Sample 3 manually. To do this, we'll open DCT. Under the Member Data dropdown, select New Member. When the New Member window appears, complete the appropriate fields and click Create. For a small employer, visually comparing files is an option, but may not be practical for large employer populations. Using a VLOOKUP formula in Excel is a good way to compare the CAT export files to your payroll files to determine the information you will need to update onto the DCT. The same process will apply when it comes to exporting the remaining files. Use this export feature to determine the information CAT already has and to compare it with your records. Once you've determined what is missing from the DCT, you can begin to prepare your import files.
Now let us proceed with the employer data importing process. You'll have to import the files in the following order. Status update file. If in-year status changes were not reported to CAT, this file is required. Earnings and contributions file. If a status update file has been loaded, this file is required. Member information and year-end updates file. Contains all members with one row per member. Each row includes the total year-to-date earnings, contributions, service, and pension adjustment. It will include any in-year data that was reported previously to CAT or that has been updated during the DCT process. For DB Prime members, the regular earnings do not include any lump sum, vacation, or retroactive pay. These fields are separate and are reported in addition to the regular earnings. For DB Plus members, regular earnings will include lump sum, vacation, and retroactive pays as applicable. This is outlined in the data import requirements found in the DCT guide. This is a required file. Going forward, I'll refer to the member information and year-end updates file as the year-to-date file. Prior year retroactive payments file. This file is for DB Prime members only. Retro payments are to be recorded and loaded using this file as applicable. Last day worked file. If a DB Plus member has a non-contributing status, their last day worked must be reported. When it comes to importing your files, the process is the same. When reporting contributions on the import data files, it is important to note the differences between DB Prime and DB Plus contribution reporting requirements. Here's a table that reviews a few example scenarios where certain columns must be used to report contributions. For your convenience, the green columns indicate employee contributions, while the blue columns represent employer contributions. The year-to-date and earnings and contributions import data file contains separate columns to report the different employee contributions amount, such as for regular, pregnancy, and RCA, but it also has columns to report regular pregnancy employer contribution amounts. Please note, however, only DB Plus employer contributions are required to be reported on the DCT. If a member only has DB Prime service in the reporting year and therefore only has DB Prime contributions, it would only be required to report the contribution amount in the green column as applicable. Examples 1 and 2 represent members who only have DB Prime contributions for the year. As you can see, no employer contribution amounts are reported for these examples. Next, examples 3 and 4 represent members who only have DB Plus contributions for that year. As employee and employer contributions are matched under the DB Plus provision, you can see the appropriate columns used in the table. But what if a member had both DB Prime and DB Plus contributions during the year? Example 5 shows how the contributions can be reported on the import file. As you can see, $5,000 is reported in the year-to-date contributions reg column, as it represents both DB Prime and DB Plus employee regular contributions for the year. As it is not required to report DB Prime employer contributions, the column year-to-date contributions DB Plus ER reg only contains $1,000, which represents the DB Plus contributions for this member. Example 6 is for a member who was on a pregnancy leave as a DB Prime member at the start of the year, and upon their return to active status, they became DB Plus. As you can see, there's additional care required when there's a mixture of regular and pregnancy contributions. In this table, for example 6, you can see that the year-to-date contributions reg column only contains $600, which represents DB Plus regular contributions. The $5,000 DB Prime contributions are stated in the correct year-to-date contributions PRG column as they relate to pregnancy contributions. Lastly, the $600 in DB Plus employer contributions can be found in the year-to-date contributions DB Plus ER reg column. If in-year data was not provided, you will have to import a status updates file and earnings and contributions file prior to importing your year-to-date and retroactive payment files. These files must be imported in that order. To start the import process, go to Utilities and select Data Import, Import Data. The Upload Data File window will appear. Browse for the file and click Upload. In the next screen, the Select Import section will appear. The first section of the upper screen will show the first 20 rows of member data that's been pulled from the file being imported. Below that, in the Select a section to import, you will select the type of file being loaded. For example, a status import file or an earnings and contributions file. Be sure to select the correct import file, as this will help the system determine the type of mapping specifications to be populated on the next screen. The field mapping options will differ depending on the type of import file. To ensure the right data is loaded to the correct DCT data fields, it is very important that the applicable database column is selected. If your column headers match the field names exactly, DCT will map the fields for you. If they don't match, you'll have to map the database headings to the appropriate source data file. Once complete, select Import Data. If there are fields you do not need to load from your payroll file, you can select Skip, and the DCT will not import them. Please note there are additional fields to map for DB Plus members. Please refer to the DCT guide for the DCT load field specifications. In the status update fields, if a member has a change in their plan design within the year, you will also have to map the plan design. If there are any problems during the data import, DCT will provide detailed error messages. If an error appears, it means the data for that record did not load. The error will show which line of data failed from the import file. It is recommended that you fix all errors to be sure all data is loaded into the DCT. These errors will be on the import log. The import log can be found in the Reports dropdown under Error Reports, Import Log. There is a list of the various types of import errors in the DCT guide, along with suggestions on how to correct them. You can load these files multiple times. Any changes made to the file will update the member record in the DCT. If the data is the same, no information will be updated or deleted. There is no need to reset the data each time you load the file. Once you've successfully imported your data, the final step is the data validation. This can be done in one of two ways. On the Import Summary screen, once all the import records have been loaded, or by opening the drop-down menu in the navigation ribbon for member data, then clicking Run Validation. The data validations will take a few minutes to run, depending on the size of your member population. Once complete, you can view the various reports on the home screen under Data Problems and also under the Reports drop-down in the navigation ribbon.
Let's go into DCT and do a live demonstration of the data import process and running data validations. As previously mentioned, the data problems report will show the total number of errors and warnings for each type of report. Prior to importing the data files and running data validations, most of the reports will show 0 as shown here. Please note, the missing info report will show you any members who have statuses that require payroll data. This count will change after you import your in-year data and run validations. After the data has been imported and the validation has been run, the system will analyze the imported data and generate the error reports. The counts under data problems will change. If your in-year data is not up to date, you will start with the status update file, followed by the earnings contribution file, the year-to-date file, the retroactive pay file, and lastly, the NC file, if applicable. For each file imported, we will review the import errors and at the end, run the data validations. Let us assume that after comparing the DCT status export file with our payroll data, Jane's sample was identified as being on a pregnancy leave effective February 5th, 2021, and returned to work on April 2nd, 2021. As this return to work status was not reflected in her DCT data, We will start with importing the status update file. On the navigation ribbon, we will click the Utilities drop-down and select Import Data. When the Upload Data File window appears, we will browse and select the status update file and click Upload. Once selected, we will see a snapshot of what's in the data file. This will help to determine if the correct file was selected. In the lower section, select Status Update and click Proceed to Field Mapping. When the mapping window appears, we will map the appropriate fields for the status update file. As my column headers in my import file match the database column names, no mapping was required for this example. Click Import Data. For each file imported, you will need to review this import summary as it will notify you of any import issues with the data load. In the import summary, there is an error at line 2, employment status, due to an invalid field value. So let's open our status import file and review the issue at line 2. Under the employment status column, we notice an incorrect field code. Instead of ACT for active, we have TAC. If we view this member in the DCT, Jane Sample, you will see that her active status was not loaded because of this incorrect employment status. We will minimize DCT and open the status update file to fix the issue. We will change the employment status from TAC to ACT, save, and follow the steps to re-import the status update file into DCT. Do this by opening DCT, clicking the Utilities drop-down, and select Import Data. When the Upload Data File window appears, we will browse for the file and select Upload. In the following screen, we will select Status Update File and click Proceed to Field Mapping. We will now map the appropriate fields for the status update file and click Import Data. This import summary now shows 0 errors. If we look at the member's DCT record, we see that the active status has been loaded under the Status and Payroll Data section. The next step is to add the earnings and contributions for that pregnancy period. We know that she contributed through payroll deductions based on her status of PRG, Pregnancy Parental Leave, Payroll Deduction. We will repeat these steps for the earnings and contributions file. This file is used to upload earnings, contributions, and service for members with in-year status changes for whom this data was not previously reported to CAT. We will click the Utilities drop-down and select Import Data. When the Upload Data File window appears, we will browse for the file and select Upload. In the following screen, select the Earnings and Contributions file and click Proceed to Field Mapping. We will map the appropriate fields for the Earnings and Contributions file and click Import Data. The import summary shows no errors with this file load. To make sure the data loaded as expected, we will go to the home page and pull up the member's record. And when the record opens, we will see the pregnancy earnings and pregnancy contributions populated in the lower section under Status and Payroll Data. Now that our in-year data is complete, we will proceed with loading our year-to-date file. However, before we do, let's open and review what's on the year-to-date file. The file should contain all members with 1 row per member. Each row includes the total year-to-date earnings, contributions, service, and DB Prime and DB Plus pension adjustment. For DB Prime members, the regular earnings do not include any lump sum, vacation, or retroactive pay. These fields are separate and are reported in addition to the regular earnings. However, for DB Plus members, regular earnings will include lump sum, vacation, and retroactive pays, as applicable. This is outlined in the data import requirements. For members who were in both DB Prime and DB Plus in 2021, the pension adjustment for each plan design needs to be reported separately. However, the earnings and contributions should reflect the total earnings and employee contributions from both plan designs. Under the year-to-date columns for employer contributions, only the DB Plus employer contributions should be reported. The demographic data is frozen, so you cannot map these fields. You can keep the fields in your import file, like I have, or remove them, whatever is easier for you. Just note, you cannot load these fields to the DCT, and this is to ensure that the data CAT has on file is not accidentally overridden. If you need to make a change to a member's record, please submit a member change of information form to CAT. Now let's load the year-to-date file. We will open DCT, click the Utilities dropdown, and select Import Data. When the Upload Data File window appears, we will browse, select the year-to-date file, and click Upload. The default on this screen is the member information and year-end updates file. Click Proceed to Field Mapping. Here's an example of where I have to manually map fields. Once mapped, click Import Data. Oh, it looks like there's an import summary. Looks like our import summary for the year-to-date file shows an error at line 8 with the message, member record does not exist in DCT, new or terminated in prior year. Let's pull up my year-to-date file and check for line 8. Looking at the file, the issue involves member Mary Profile 4. If we use the View Edit Data option under the Member Data dropdown, we can compare her SIN in DCT to our year-to-date file. By doing this, we notice that the last digit of her SIN is incorrect. On the year-to-date file, we have a 0 for the last digit. However, DCT has a 6. We will change the last digit from 0 to 6 on the year-to-date file. Save and reload the file to DCT. We will do this by clicking the Utilities dropdown and select Import Data. When the Upload Data File window appears, we will browse, select the year-to-date file, and then Upload. We will select Member Information and Year-End Updates file and click Proceed to Field Mapping. We will map the appropriate fields and click Import Data. The import summary now shows 0 errors, so all my records on my year-to-date file have been successfully loaded into the DCT. If you have any retroactive payments in the year, load them after the year-to-date file. Lastly, if there were any DB Plus members who were non-contributing in 2021, you will need to provide the last day worked. You can do this by importing a non-contributing file containing the member SIN, employee ID, and last day worked. Here is an example of an NC file and the required fields, SIN, employee ID, and last day worked. All of our data files have been successfully loaded without further errors. We will now run the data validation and address any data errors and warnings. Under the Member Data dropdown, we will select Run Validation. Previously on the home screen, we showed 0 data problems. However, After loading the data and running the validations, the data problems section on the home screen now displays numbers. These data problems of errors and warnings must be investigated before we can proceed with the data submission. The requirement is to correct as many errors and warnings as possible, as data can only be submitted once each error has been investigated and cleared. If there are any errors that cannot be cleared, your employer pension analyst can override the error. Note this should be the last step before the data is submitted, as any validations run after an override has been checked will be erased. Let's look at some of the validation problems. On the home screen, we will select Contribution Problems under Data Problems. On the report, we have Donald Case 5. If we double-click his name and open up his record, we can view all his validations under the Validation Results tab. On the last row, the validations is telling us that the earnings for this member is greater than the maximum RCA threshold, but no RCA contributions have been provided. If we click on his Summary tab, we will see that his total regular contributions are over the calculated amount. After confirming the contribution amount with your payroll records, you can correct his contribution amount in the lower browser. You would change the regular contributions to $24,990.42. And using the plus symbol beside contributions, add the contribution record for RCA in the amount of $3,871.98. Click Recalculate. And now our contribution amounts are matching. We will go back to the Validation Results tab and rerun validation. Running the validations in this tab will validate this member's record only. Following our fix and rerunning of the validations, the contribution error flag has disappeared. Let's look at another data problem report for service problems. On this report, we have John Doe. If we double-click his name and open his record to view all his validations under the Validation Results tab, the service error is telling us that this member's service is not within tolerance. Under reported value, we have 1 year, which conflicts with the expected value of 0.4023 years. Looking at his personal tab, this member joined partway throughout the year on August 7, 2021. Therefore, he should not have a full year of service. We will have to correct his pensionable service by manually updating the DCT. Alternatively, we can correct our year-to-date import file and reload. In the interest of time, we will manually update his service from 1 to 0.4023 under the status and payroll data field. Note, due to the incorrect service reported, DCT is flagging the regular contributions and pension adjustment as data issues. DCT used the incorrectly reported service to calculate what the regular contributions and pension adjustment should be. As a result, it is not matching my reported values, even though I know my reported values are correct. When the service has been corrected in the status and payroll data section, we will click Recalculate. By doing this, I see that his regular contributions and pension adjustment now match. We will go back to the Validation Results tab and click Run Validation. This will remove the errors and warnings. These are just some of the errors you will come across. In case you do not know how to clear the error, the DCT guide does have a list of validation warnings and errors along with corrective actions. If you have any trouble clearing errors, you can always contact your employer pension analyst. If you realize that you have made a mistake and would like to start over, for example, you realize that your file had incorrect pension adjustments, you can reset the data back to the way it was when it was released to you. To do this, under the Utilities dropdown, select Reset Data. But please remember, this will erase any import data or manual changes you have made, so please ensure that you truly want to reset the data. Once you have investigated and cleared the errors and applicable warnings and are ready to submit your DCT data, you must first run validations. In the event you need the employer pension analyst to override an error and you have provided them with your supporting worksheets, they can override the error after you have run your final validations and are ready to submit. When you are ready to submit, under the member data dropdown, select Send Data. Please note, once you click OK to confirm, your data will be locked. However, if you do submit by accident, you can always contact your employer pension analyst and they can unlock it for you. As there are multiple errors that have not yet been cleared, we are unable to complete this final step. Once your data has been successfully submitted, an email notification will be sent to CAT. As a reminder, the submission deadline is March 7th.
This slide provides highlights of the DCT changes that we have made. Some of these changes have been made based on comments and suggestions from employers. On the earnings and contributions file and the year-to-date file, we've updated the naming convention for the predefined column names for employer regular and employer pregnancy contributions to include DB+. If your spreadsheets have any header columns, you may want to update them so it's easier to map during the import process. We added a new report to export data. This new report is called Member Data, Expected Amounts, and Difference. It displays members' data that you reported, the expected values, and the difference. We also added an all-member data report under Export Data. It is the same report that you will find under the Member Data, View, Edit Data, but we've improved the formatting to make it more user-friendly. This slide provides highlights of some additional DCT changes. We added a new Authorized Statutory Leave Status, STL, for you to report statutory leaves other than pregnancy parental leaves. We've updated the gray bar in the member details screen. It now only shows the member employee number, name, and date of birth. In the export data, the file name for members with NC status has been updated to members with NC statuses and a last day worked. As a reminder, this report only applies to college sector employers. On the next 3 slides, we've listed a few reminders to watch for when going through the DCT. Send missed enrollments, change forms, and benefit applications via PAL to ensure prompt processing. Review tolerances to determine if a revised termination, retirement, or death form is necessary. Change of information forms are not required for members who change employee group throughout the year. Update the employee group with a January 1st effective date under status and payroll data. Check the import error report for any rejected members. If you cannot find a member with a changed SIN, search the old SIN before adding again to the DCT. If you're making changes to the original data on DCT, make a note under Comments in the Summary tab. Add 2021 retroactive payments for retirements and terminations. Review the DCT guide for reporting requirements for importing pregnancy parental data and reduced workload statuses. Provide contribution worksheets as requested, and reconcile data before submitting your DCT. These slides are available on the CAT website under the Employer tab within the Employer Education Guide. They can be referenced at any time. There are multiple resources available to employers during the data collection process. The DCT Guide and the DCT Data Submission Checklist can be found under the Help menu in DCT. It will be available Friday, January 21st. Also, both the DCT Guide and DCT Submission Checklist will be available on the CAT website under the Employer tab within the Employer Education Guide. You can contact your employer pension analyst with any questions.
There is nothing further. So this will conclude the DCT overview. Now I will hand it over to Sean to review the contribution reconciliation process.
Thank you, Evelyn. The reconciliation process begins each year with the DCT being released to the employers by our Employer Services team. On March 31st, 2022, 2 Excel workbooks showing all contributions remitted for both CAT Pension Plan and CAT RCA, if applicable, will be delivered via email. The 2 workbooks will contain the summary of CAT 2021 contributions and the summary of RCA 2021 contributions. Please go through these 2 spreadsheets in detail and verify that the reported figures to ensure that what was remitted to CAT Pension Plan and CAT RCA, if applicable, is what is reported on the spreadsheets. The first document is an example of the CAT summary of 2021 pension contributions. This spreadsheet lists the aggregate remitted figures by month for the year 2021, with totals on the right-hand side and at the bottom of the page. Please note that the individual lines on this report list the amounts of monthly pregnancy parental payroll deductions. The next slide is a sample of the CAT RCA contribution spreadsheet. This report is an example of the CAT summary of RCA contributions for the year 2021. Similarly, here the figures should be verified against your remittance records. The spreadsheet for the most part looks the same as last year. We do ask that you note that the RCA employer fee paid line shows you the amount paid towards the RCA fee invoice throughout the year 2021. In summary, the key verification items will be to confirm that the cash sent by the employer agrees with CAT's records. If there are reporting errors on the side of CAT, we ask that you reach out to CAT Finance. However, if you have payroll-related errors on the side of you, the employer, we do ask that you hold on to them for when the time comes to report them through DCT. If discrepancies are apparent, please reach out with your concerns. Otherwise, no confirmation is required if your data agrees with your records. Note that the deadline for reporting any discrepancies is April 15th, 2022. If no discrepancies are reported, we will consider these reports as approved. Following employer approval of the 2 worksheets, which again are CAT RPP summary and CAT RCA summary, the final versions will be forwarded by finance to the pension analysts, who will then prepare the schedule of adjustments in the summary data report. Finance will then use these reports to prepare the annual statement of contributions. Here is an example of the CAT Pension Plan annual statement of contributions. The CAT RCA annual statement of contributions, for the most part, looks very similar. This report has not changed from last year. The annual statement of contribution pulls all the information together into one place. The first line shows the subtotal of the regular and pregnancy parental payroll deduction contributions from the original master employer DCT file submission. The second line reconciles this figure to the final figure of what should have been remitted as reported on the summary data report. This is then compared to the actual cash received by the plan, with the difference formulating an outstanding balance due to or from CAT Pension Plan. Here is an example of the CAT RCA annual statement of contributions. Again, the first line shows the subtotal of regular contributions from the original master employer DCT file submission. The second line reconciles this figure to the final figure of what should have been remitted to the RCA plan as reported on the summary data report, the summary DCT report. This is then compared to the actual cash received by the plan with the difference formulating the outstanding balance due to or from CAT RCA. Note that for 2021 reconciliation, the employer column factors in the CAT RCA fee invoiced into the calculation. If there is a balance owing to CAT RCA or CAT RPP, please remit them directly to CIBC Mellon. If you are sending payments via EFT, please send payments to CIBC Mellon in your regular fashion. At the same time that you are submitting your payment, you should also send in the invoice to CIBC Mellon and CAT Finance via email. The information is listed on the slide above. If you are sending payment by check, please send the check along with the invoice to CIBC Mellon in your regular fashion. The address is listed above. In the case where there is a balance due to the employer, please look at the member and employer column and the total column in the annual statement to determine the amount available to be taken as a credit by you, the employer. Please claim this credit against your next monthly remittance by showing a credit on the CAT RPP and RCA Contribution Remittance Summary Form, also known as Form 34A. Note that your monthly contribution remittance will remain unaffected. Here you can see an example of such a credit on the Contribution Remittance Summary Form 34A. Please remember to retrieve the relevant contribution form from our website at the time when you prepare the remittance to ensure that the most up-to-date version is being used. Here you can see an example of an employer reporting an underpayment on the Contribution Remittance Summary Form 34A. Again, we do ask that you retrieve the most relevant form from our website to make sure you're using the most up-to-date version. This concludes the finance portion of today's presentation. If you have any questions, we can answer them now or in the future. Our finance email is listed on the slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Evelyn, and thank you everyone for attending today's training session. We hope that you found it helpful. As always, we ask that you provide your employer pension analyst with a list of everyone who attended today's session so that we can track this information on your behalf. We'll provide this information back to you on a quarterly basis and then again at the end of the year as part of the attestation process. When you leave today's meeting, you'll have an opportunity to complete a brief survey. We would really appreciate you taking the time to complete the survey, as this will help us in making these sessions more valuable to you. Thanks again to everyone who attended today's session. Have a great day.